welcome to episode 2 of Build a Baked Good. I'm your host, Missy, and your cook, Missy. And this is this week's guest, Zach Rizza.
Hi.
What are we here for?
We're here to bake a good that I hold true in my heart. Because when I was a young kid, I liked chocolate and I liked pretzels. And probably around 6 or 7, I used to have chocolate milk with pretzels. Then I said, you know what? I'm going to kick it up a notch a little bit. I'm going to add some peanut butter to this. So I asked Missy to add pretzels, chocolate, and peanut butter in a baked good.
So that's what we're going to do today. So the idea that I'm going with is kind of like a bullseye candy. You've got the peanut butter covered in the chocolate, and to add the pretzel, we're actually going to do a soft baked pretzel as the very center of that bullseye, with a layer of creamy peanut butter dipped in milk chocolate. So there's a 3-step process to this.
Okay.
And it's an interesting process. We'll have.
I like interesting.
You like interesting? I
like interesting.
Well, that's good. We will have the recipe available online for everyone after the fact, and we'll go through everything step by step. But let's get started on your pretzel.
Sounds good.
Peanut butter chocolate
thing.
Masterpiece.
Yeah.
Okay, for the soft pretzel, what we're going to start out with is we're going to start out with 2 packets of active dry yeast. We need to get this going in some warm water, so it calls for 1 1/4 cups of warm water. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and cut open our 2 yeast packets and just sprinkle that across the top of the water, back and forth until the packet's empty. And then our second packet of yeast, we're going to do the same thing with. Just toss that off to the side. So there's that. Thank you.
Yep.
And we let this sit while we work on the rest of it. So I'm just going to pop this over here. That's what you've got, your yeast and your water. Set it aside for about 10 minutes. And in the time that we're going to be doing the next step of everything, give or take, that should be ready to go. You want that to be creamy, a creamy consistency, by the time that it's ready to be used. So we're also going to add in a teaspoon of white sugar into this mix, and then just let that sit. Up next, we're actually going to start on the base for our dough. So we have 5 cups of flour that we've measured out, and we're going to go ahead and put that in to our mixer bowl. Use the spatula here to make sure that we get all the flour out of the bowl, or as much of it as we can, so we have as close as we can have to the 5 cups. To that, we're going to add 1/2 cup of sugar, 1 1/2 teaspoons of regular salt, and then we're going to go ahead and use your dough hook to kind of mix this in together a little bit before we actually start adding the rest of the ingredients. I'm going to put this on a medium speed, so that way you're not kicking the flour everywhere, but it's enough to kind of get it mixed in a little bit. That should be good, just for a little bit to get it going. And that should be mixed in pretty well right now. Okay, going to come over here and check on the yeast again. With the yeast, I'm going to use the wooden spoon just to get everything down into the water a little bit more. It needs just a couple of more minutes on that. So in the meantime, while we're waiting on that, I also have measured out what we're going to do is we're going to create a small well in the center of this flour mixture. What we're going to do is we're going to put the oil into that with the yeast mixture, and then we're going to let the dough hook mix everything in to create a nice dough. So we're looking just about ready on that over there. In the meantime, I have 1 tablespoon of oil that we're going to use, like I said, just to pop it there in the center of the flour mixture. Hand that off to my beautiful assistant over here. Okay, and then we're ready to go with the yeast. So that we're going to go ahead and just pop in. Again, down there in the center. Make sure all of the yeast that you can get out of there, because that's what's going to make this thing rise beautifully. Put this up, and then we're going to go ahead and let this do its thing. Now, you want to start out on low with this, because adding the moisture into the mix it starts to get a little bit clumpy, and it'll kick your flour up over off the side. Once it starts to combine a little bit better, then you're going to want to go ahead and kick it up a little bit more to get it to mix in well. You also have to keep an eye on it to make sure that your dough is not too dry. If it's too dry, it's not going to work well for what we're doing. This is actually looking a little bit dry. Mm-hmm. So I have some water that I've set aside over here, and we're just going to add a couple of tablespoons just so that we can mix it in well. So while this is still mixing, we're going to go ahead and add in 2 directly because it is kind of dry. So there's 1 and 2 tablespoons. And I'm going to turn this up just a little bit to get it going a little bit more. See, this is the work you're making me do over here, man.
I know. I like it. It's all going to come out in the end, bro.
Hopefully it will.
Hopefully. Knock on wood.
It's still looking a little bit dry, so I'm going to add another 2 tablespoons of water in. And you don't want to add the water too fast, or it will get too mushy and you really can't do much with the dough at that point. If it does that, just add in a little bit more flour and just to dry it up a little bit more, and you should be good to go.
I can actually see it starting to get a little doughy already, like just a little bit.
Yeah, in the very middle, and this is why we progressively add a little bit more water in. Okay, this is pretty good over here, so we're going to go ahead and take this off of here. Can you put that in there?
Yep.
Your dough should be moist, but not too moist as far as things are concerned. Knead it together by hand just to kind of evenly spread the moisture. If it feels like you need a little bit more, go ahead and add a little bit more in, and then just kind of knead it around by hand to make sure that everything's good to go. We've got a nice moist dough, but it's not too
moist.
It's not too moist. It's not too dry. It's a pretty good consistency for dough. And then comes one of the fun parts. Can you hand me that brown bowl there?
Brown bowl.
Okay. The nice part about this recipe is that with the yeast, you have to let it rise. So we're going to take just a regular sized, about a medium sized bowl, and we're going to have to spray it. So you just want to make sure that you've got some vegetable spray, and spray the bowl that you're putting it in really well, because what this is going to do is this is going to keep the dough from sticking, and it's going to allow it to finish to rise. So you want to make sure that the entire bowl is well coated. And then we're just going to go ahead and transfer this over. Use my handy dandy little spatula here. And then you set it aside near a nice warm area, cover it, and in about an hour or so it's going to rise. And then once it rises, we'll be able to actually make the little pretzel balls to finish out our recipe.
Sounds good.
So this is what our dough is supposed to look like. It's risen beautifully. It's doubled in size. I don't know about you, but my favorite part about pretzels is the salt on them.
Yes.
So in this right here, we're going to go ahead and get it ready for the mix, because we're going to go ahead and ball these out onto a cookie sheet. We're going to pop them in the oven. When they come out of the oven, they're going to be all good, ready to go. Our oven in the meantime is preheated to 450 degrees so that we can get that going. In a large bowl, we need to have 4 cups of hot water. So Riz, if I can get you to hold the bowl for me, we're going to get 5 cups of hot water. So did you realize that there was so much involved with pretzels, Riz?
No, I did not. I'm sorry you had to do this.
Oh,
you had to find out.
This is fun.
Oh yeah, this is fun.
The best thing is it's a yeast. It's a yeast product. So the best thing about the yeast is you get the best flavor out of it when you're doing breads, and you get the best consistency out of it,
right?
Because you have to let it rise. So that's 3 cups of water there, and we're working on our 4th, and we'll be ready to go over here.
Now, what made you do the thumbprint? Is it thumb? No, not thumbprints. The type of baked good we're doing now, like the style.
They're nice and they're easy to manage. It's something that people don't have to cut into, so it's easy to handle.
Right.
If I'm walking by, I can just kind of grab one off the tray and be good to go. If you're going to a party, it's nice to have
nice little tray.
Yeah, people look at it like, wow, that looks really cool. What is it? Oh, wouldn't you like to know? This is how I made it. So yeah, we've got 4 cups of hot water here, and then we have half a cup of baking soda. We're going to go ahead and sprinkle that in there so that it dissolves pretty well and thoroughly in there. And it's fizzing pretty good as that baking soda is starting to react to everything. What we're going to do is we're actually going to start making our little pretzel balls. So we have a well-greased cookie sheet, and we have our dough. Now, the dough, as with any other dough, there's air in there, so you want to make sure that it's nice and ready to go. Just go ahead and knead it a couple of times, and then we can break off little balls of it. Go ahead and roll it into a ball, and we're going to stick it into just a nice sized ball. We're going to go ahead and stick it into this mix just to get it coated.
Need it bigger than this, or
a little bit bigger than that? Come on, people want a nice mouthful. So we're just going to dip that in there just long enough to get it coated. You don't want it in there too long or it'll start to dissolve everything. And we're going to go ahead and put these on the cookie sheet. They're not going to rise very much, but they're going to get a nice pretzel-y coat to them. So just dip it in the water and take it out. Pop it on the tray. And kind of like when you're doing cookies, you want to set them far enough apart that you're going to be able to do stuff with it. So we can, for a regular size cookie sheet, you could probably fit a good 12 of them across. 3 across the top, 4 down. We've got just about a tray of these done. The amount of dough that you're going to have depends on how long you let it rise. Obviously, the longer you let it rise, the more dough essentially you're going to have. And right now, we've got pretty close to a dozen with the one here in my hand and the one the Riz has. We'll have a dozen here to get started out with. Okay, so these are ready to bake after we sprinkle them with the salt.
Sounds good.
So we've got coarse sea salt over here. So it's the thicker, coarse stuff that you find on a nice deli bakery pretzel. Okay, so we're going to sprinkle the top with that. I like a lot of salt. I don't know about you.
Oh, yeah, I like salt too.
So we're going to put quite a bit of salt on the top of that. Get it going. It's okay if it drips over onto the pan because it'll absorb and actually it'll melt and then we'll be good. It'll absorb into the bottom of it a little bit. So
it'll get nice and not really even, but it'll get on the bottom too.
A little bit. I mean, not as much, but around the edges more specifically. So we're going to go ahead and set the sea salt aside for the moment and take this over to the oven. How do you think it's going to turn out?
I hope it turns out good, because I like pretzels, like I said before. So and I know you're a good cook.
Oh, well, thank you. Tell you what, in the meantime, let's go ahead and start working on the next step, which is going to be the peanut butter. Because when those come out, we're going to have to let them cool for a little bit. But if we can go ahead and just get them pretty much right into that peanut butter mix, we'll be good to go. We're going to go ahead and turn this on to about a medium heat here. And just got a regular pan. We have half a cup of butter, stick margarine. I let it get soft so it's a little bit easier to melt once we actually get it in here. So we're going to pop that on into the bowl, or I'm sorry, into the pan. Just set that aside. Yep. And the heat on here, it's starting to melt, so we're just going to melt that down. Okay, so in addition to the butter, which is, like we've got half a cup or 1 stick of butter, we have half a cup of peanut butter and 1 cup of sugar. Or I'm sorry, a 1/4 cup of sugar. Now, into the butter mixture, we're actually going to go ahead and add the sugar into that. Thank you, Riz.
Yep.
And again, I just like to kind of spread it evenly through there so we get the most coverage through it. And we're going to go ahead and continue stirring that until the butter is completely melted. Okay, our butter is completely melted down. And we've got the sugar added into it. So we've got this nice little fluid mix there. Now comes the really fun part. I'm going to reduce the heat. Actually, I'm going to turn that off right now for this burner. And then we're going to add Zach's peanut butter into it.
Oh, yeah.
So right here we've got half a cup of peanut butter. The peanut butter, of course, sticks to everything, but that's part of the good thing that we're hoping for. It's going to help stick to these pretzel balls once we get them out. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then we're going to go ahead and carefully stir in the peanut butter and get it so that it's nice and creamy. You want the nice creamy mix so that we can dip those pretzel balls right into it and have it coat nicely onto the outer edge of that. And if it's a little bit thin, you can thicken it up with some confectioner's sugar, or you could add a thickening agent to it, a little bit of cornstarch or something, which is actually something that looks like we might need to do because this is more of a
watery base,
consistency. Yeah. So, and I'm just going to add about 4 tablespoons just to try to thicken that up a little bit. You want it to cover pretty well, and see how nicely it's sticking to the spoon there. That's what we want, because we want it to stick nicely to those pretzels. And I'm going to remove this from the heat now so that we can start letting it set up a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll just pop this right on over here in the front. And that'll be good to go by the time these pretzels are out in the next couple of minutes. Pop that over to the side.
They do look good.
Okay, I'm going to say that these bad boys are done. And they're hot because they just came out of the oven. But for those of you studio audience, nice and brown, golden, kind of how you want for a soft pretzel.
Mm-hmm.
You get that nice hard outer part of it, and I bet you that in part is going to be nice and soft and gooey, ooey, wonderful, which will go well with the rest of it.
Right. You want them fully covered or just...
Yep.
All right.
I mean, a Reese's peanut cup, is it only partially?
No.
No.
Okay, I got it.
We're going to go the full shebang. So we've got this nicely put together and coated like that. Kind of wipe off the excess on the bottom. And then we're going to stick that over onto the sheet. And what that's going to do is that's going to hopefully set up nicely over there with the peanut butter on it, so that we can go ahead and get the chocolate going. You can step into the top of it. That way it holds a little bit better and doesn't slide off the bottom fork. Now, depending on what size pan you're using, we're actually having to kind of scoop the peanut butter up onto the top of the pretzel. You can use as much peanut butter as you want on there. If you want it just slightly covered, you can just lightly cover it. If you just want to dip the bottom of it into it and have the top of it, it's pretty much your decision how you want to do it. But we're going to go ahead and I'm going to make sure that mine get covered. Yeah. I'm even going to go ahead and flip it a little bit so it gets nicely covered. And then I'm going to pop this right back over there. And I'm going to let you finish on that while I start on the next step.
Sounds good.
Just go ahead and get some of your baking wafers. These I found melt down easier than chocolate chips do. So I use the chocolate wafers. You can pick them up at your local grocery store, your market, or you can get them from a craft store in their wedding cake section. So they're relatively easy to find. Now these are milk chocolate. You can use dark chocolate if you'd like. You can use white chocolate if you'd like. But when Riz told me he wanted chocolate, we're going to go with the standard standby milk chocolate. So
that's what I meant to.
We need to melt this down. So I have, you can either use a double boiler, or, for purposes of this, I'm just going to go ahead and use 2 saucepans, because if you don't have a double boiler, you don't need one. You can create one from your own stock of stuff in your kitchen. So I've got 2 saucepans that are about the same size, and I've got water in the one, and it's not that much water, just enough to kind of cover the bottom of it. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm just swapping water out here because I realized that pan is the one that I usually use for the bottom, so it's a little bit more marred than the one that I'm using. But chocolate's kind of finicky, so you want to make sure that there's no water in with the chocolate, so I'm just going to go ahead and towel this out real quick just to make sure that we can have the best chocolate experience possible, because I don't want to ruin any chocolate. Like that's just a that's just bad. That's a catastrophe.
Yeah, don't even bring that up.
Okay, so we've got a nice dry pan to go in on the top of that. I'm going to turn my heat on to a medium heat, and I'm just going to go ahead and put my wafers into my other pan. Now the thing you have to be careful about with the double boiler like this is that most double boilers you can lock it in. This right here, essentially my hand is going to be the locking mechanism. So I'm going to have it sit, you can either have it sit right in on top of the water. I usually keep mine kind of like chopsticks, and I keep it out like this with my finger in between just to kind of keep it even keel, so that I'm not having to worry about the water accidentally, spilling over anything in the bottom one. So we've got that going, we've got some heat. It's going to take a little bit for the heat to get through the water, to heat the water up and start the steam to do the chocolate. Now, chocolate you don't want to do directly on the burner, because chocolate will burn. And it burns at a very low temperature. So once you get it into, like if I were to put this pan directly onto the heat source, I would wind up marring my chocolate. It would be ruined, and I wouldn't be able to use it, and that would just be really sad. But you want to keep a constant watch on your chocolate. And I usually use a wooden spoon. You can use a regular spoon, but I prefer wooden spoons when I'm doing my baking and my cooking. And just make sure that you're constantly stirring your chocolate. What that does is it gets everything an even temperature across the board, so it helps it melt faster. And it also makes sure that you have the best options for minimal coverage, so you're not having to use more chocolate. If you want to thin it out, now's the time to add just a little bit of water into it to thin it out. Because once it starts to heat up, you don't want to heat it up too much. And actually, I apologize, it's not water that you want to use, it's a little bit of vegetable oil, because the water will make it'll make it seize, which means that you can't use it. It makes it kind of this goopy, gelatinous mess, which, again, as a chocolate lover, it just makes me cry whenever I ruin a batch of chocolate. So this chocolate is starting to melt here, and the water underneath is starting to boil pretty well, and the heat from the boiling water is, again, what gets your chocolate melting. And it takes a couple minutes for this. Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, the peanut butter over there on those looks really good. If you want to have a slightly thicker layer of peanut butter, you can always do your consistency for your peanut butter layer so that it's a little bit more
thick.
So it's a little thicker. Mm-hmm. But that's
good for me.
Yeah, it seems to have coated pretty well. The other option I was considering when Riz asked me to do this was injecting the inside of the pretzel with this peanut butter. Was another option that I had. Maybe next time.
Yeah, next time. That does sound good.
And that'll get it to a nice spreadable consistency, more specifically a dippable consistency. Makes it a little bit easier to handle when you're dipping stuff into it. So if you're looking for like a chocolate fondue type of thing, that's the consistency we're looking for. Dip in nicely to cover it, and then not enough that it's going to run off by the time that we actually do stuff with it. The only other thing with the chocolate is you want to make sure that it's melted all the way through, so that you're not having chunks of chocolate. It covers better. I mean, you can always do it if it's a little bit lumpy, but I think it covers nicer if you actually have it completely melted. So we're just about there with this batch. And like I said, you have to constantly stir it to make sure that you're not burning it. The other thing with using this as your double boiler, you need to make sure that you're not boiling out the water in the lower pan, so that way you're not burning your pan. Now, when I swapped things up, that's actually one of the things that had happened, was that the water had run out on a previous melting incident, and the pan is kind of marred on the bottom, but it works well for putting water in it and being my boiler pan. This time you're actually going to have to roll it in, because you don't want to melt too much chocolate, because if you have leftover chocolate, again, it's kind of a waste to have to toss it out, and you want to make sure that you've got enough chocolate to cover. So we'll let you go ahead and
have me test it out. I see.
Yep.
Just roll it?
Yep, just put it in and roll it through into the chocolate, just like that. So it's lightly covered. And
get the sides a little bit too.
Yep.
Come on. It gets sticky a little bit.
And the sticky, that's why we spray the the pan in advance to try to circumvent that as best we can. It doesn't always work, to the extent that you want it to, but it's working for all intents and purposes here. And again, this is completely experimental, so we're giving this a shot.
Because these look amazing right now.
And they smell just as wonderful as they're looking, to be completely honest. You can still see the bits of the large chunk salt coming up through the peanut butter, and then you can still see, you can still see it when it's coming into the chocolate layer too. So hopefully we've done this perfectly, and it's going to be this nice, spectacular little treat for everybody. They have, I'm sure, non-yeast recipes for soft pretzels, because you can pretty much find a non-yeast recipe for just about anything that does have yeast. It's just not as good. And I don't know about you, but the nice sourdough pretzel that you get at the ballpark, that's what I'm hoping that this is going to kind of taste like on the inside. That nice,
the nice little gooey
moist
center.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, gooey center. If you want to have a gooey center to these, cook them for slightly less time than what you would. Since this is the first time we're making these, I think that we're going to wind up with perhaps a nice gooey center like that. If not, it's going to be just well done. So it'll be a nice, perfect consistency if you're going to go to, the ballpark and get one of their pretzels. Okay, is that the last one?
That's the last one.
All right, we are on the last one for this batch. Now, the size batch that we had, actually, this is maybe a quarter of the pretzels that we would get from that batch of dough that I did.
Ooh.
How does this smell, Riz?
It smells good. It smells really good.
You ready to tear into one of these?
I'm sitting next to peanut butter and chocolate already, so yeah.
You ready to tear into one of these?
Yes.
All right.
It's really good.
Okay.
Messy but good.
We'll go ahead. Well, this might give you a fork.
Not too thick, not too thin. It's just.
Did you get enough of the peanut butter flavor?
Yes.
Okay.
Really good. I'm not even that big of a fan of peanut butter.
The mixture between the peanut butter and the chocolate are really meshing well together. And to add the salt, really good.
Other Mike, what do you think?
Very good.
The pretzel's like perfect ballpark consistency too. Like, nailed it.
And make sure that you check out cafesolstice.com for the video information, as well as for future episodes and future opportunities for Build a Baked Good. If you have something that you'd be interested in contributing, go ahead and hit us up. Again, our website is www.cafesolstice.com. And if you have a suggestion, we'd love to hear it by email. And that email is info@cafesolstice.net.